of the new China series. 3 teams traveling across China over the next 12 days. And of course, what we are doing is tracking the story of transformation in this country, the transformation that the country has seen over the past 70 years. Now, we are on the southeast route. We are in Fujian province, and we are in Xiamen at the moment, making our way to a town called Quanzhou. It is significant for the role that it played in the maritime Silk Road, but I must confess, I'm not very much well informed about the history of the maritime Silk Road.
Oh, the maritime Silk Road, right? So, China has been pushing the Belt and Road initiative that is connecting all parts of the world, right? So, the maritime Silk Road is basically part of it. So, if you want to know more about the history and China's politics, and definitely Quanzhou, the place that we're going to right now, is definitely the place to be if you want to know about the history and what happened in the past, especially during the 15th century when the maritime Silk Road reached the climax when it comes to China's trade with the world. It was very much like globalization back then. But I'm not the expert, and let me bring our guest today. We're going to tell us more about Belt and Road Initiative and also maritime Silk Road. So we have Professor Gong Jiang with University of International Business and Economics and Professor Lin Boqiang with Xiamen University. Welcome to you all. Welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, as I was saying, I don't know much about the maritime Silk Road, and I think that's partly because it wasn't really taught in our schools in a lot of, at least not in a lot of detail that I would have remembered so well. So let's start from the beginning for my benefit and viewers like me. What exactly is the maritime Silk Road? When did this start, and how far did it extend? And obviously the main reason why.
Okay, I can start. I think the maritime Silk Road refers to the trade between the East and West, particularly between China and I think mostly the Arab region at the time, as well as India and also Southeast Asia in places like Java and Philippines. The trade, I think, started around the beginning of the Song Dynasty. The Arabs were very advanced at the time in navigation technologies, so they were able to reach China, and there are things to trade. For example, the export items from the area that we're going to visit is famous for its tea, porcelain production, and other, of course, silk as well. Silk is the mainstay product of China for a long, long time. So these are the major export items, and there are also other interesting products brought in from the Arab world as well as from India for things like insects and spices and stuff like that. So there's a foundation for trade, and I think the city prospered and thrived, particularly because during that time they established a bureau for trade. So I think it contributes a lot to the development of trade in this area. As a matter of fact, Marco Polo, right? Marco Polo visited Quanzhou, and according to his description, this was a prosperous and thriving city. And he called it one of the 2 greatest havens for commerce in the world. It's the Alexandria of the East. So it was really highly regarded by Marco Polo at the time. And you can clearly see it was one of the world trading centers at the time.
But why Quanzhou? I mean, we're traveling the southeast route, so we're passing a lot of coastal cities along the way. Why specifically Quanzhou?
Well, there's some history associated with that. But to become why pick up the Quanzhou, I think it's got to do with the historical political setup at the time. And I remember that it was the largest port in the east at the point of the what we call the Silk Road, maritime Silk Road started. And I think the important point is that the economy and technology at the time really supporting the trade and supporting the port and supporting the Zhenghe going to the Silk Road. And Quanzhou, in my view, has a contribution in many ways. One is that in addition to trade, Zhenghe has been to about more than 30 countries. And they also brought a lot of Chinese into different countries. For example, the richest man in Philippines actually come from China. And the Taiwan, the one we talked about yesterday, the Han minority, the Han is majority, about 45%, their ancestors coming from Quanzhou. So the Quanzhou is the largest overseas Chinese base in Fujian province and has a lot of influence in addition to trade and some culture. For example, if you go to Philippines and go to many Southeast China, Southeast Asia, you can see the Fujian culture there. For example, like the small associations, and also they're based on their family names. They get together from time to time. And at a certain point, I was in Philippines for some time, and I feel that the culture, they preserve Chinese culture better actually than what it is in Quanzhou. So the port, the important port by itself, really bring the tremendous benefit for China. In addition to the trade, Professor Thomas talked about earlier.
So, sorry.
And that is why if you go to Quanzhou City, you can see many different kind of architects. And one that I often introduce to my guests is that the Shaolin Temple in the south. It's actually a franchise of the Shaolin Temple in Henan province.
Yeah.
And it got to be important to have franchise, right? In fact, there's only one franchise of the Shaolin Temple in China. And so really indicated the importance of the Quanzhou in the history.
So, back in the history, Linda, you went to the Shaolin Temple in central China's Henan, right? So we have something similar because people from central parts of China migrated to this place, right, during that time. Okay, so I have this question for Professor Gong. So Quanzhou used to be like the hotspot, I would say, right, of different cultures and religions back then during the Maritime Silk Road. And China now is trying to revive the Maritime Silk Road, the Belt and Road Initiative in general. So what do you think, how do you assess Quanzhou's role right now if we want to revive the Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, Quanzhou's status as a major trading port sort of declined later on because of a couple of geographical reasons. Because one important thing is that the sand accumulation at the end of the Jing River getting to the sea, so big ships can't get in anymore. Another reason is because of the trade with Japan. Ningbo, city of Ningbo became a major place for trade with Japan, so a lot of trade migrates to Ningbo. So later on, it sort of declined. But I think today, Quanzhou is no longer a major port anymore, compared to other great ports in China. Say, places like Guangzhou, Shanghai, Ningbo, Tianjin. These are much larger ports. But I think Quanzhou needs to develop and revitalize itself to restore its former glory, as one of the two greatest places.
Is it possible?
I think it has a lot to do with the regional economic development efforts on the part of the local governments. I know they try to develop other industries and other things for getting back to its glory days. But the important thing is, Quanzhou today is no longer a major port anymore. It's developing for something else.
I think it's difficult to come back to earlier glory because not just because of Quanzhou less developed, that kind of stuff. It's not. In fact, Quanzhou is the industrial base for Fujian province. It produces most of the merchandise in the Fujian province. We often say that you produce in Quanzhou and come to live in Xiamen. Xiamen is a nice place to live, but actually they don't have many factories. Most of the factories of Fujian province are actually in Quanzhou. I think got to do with the trade partners. Now you got to have trade partners with different parts of the world, not just the Southeast China, and majority of trade actually is with the United States, with Europe. So in terms of distance, Quanzhou I do not believe has advantage for the trade. So it's quite difficult to come back. However, if later on that road and bear, begin to start, I think it will progress.
Yeah.
know.
That'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we are on the southeast route, making our way to the city of Quanzhou. And as you can see, it is a beautiful day on the road in Fujian province as we're on the bus at the moment here on the southeast route. But let's check in with our colleagues in the southwest and find out what they're up to today. Sean and Taoyuan, over to you.
Three, two. Hello, everyone. Sean and I are on our 6th day of our new China adventure, feeling a bit tired, but also very excited. Today brought us to Liangshan Yi Autonomous Prefecture in southwest China's Sichuan province. Like its name suggests, it's inhabited predominantly by the ethnic Yi people. It's one of the poorest regions in China, but the Yi people also, they have a history of more than 1,700 years. So they're also a people that's rich in culture.
Exactly.
And one thing that they make is this.
Lacquerware.
Yes.
It is just absolutely amazing. We want to show you, let's go in on some of the detail of some of this. I mean, this would look amazing anywhere, and imagine just how long it takes. This is all done by hand, and it is done by people who have passed this tradition down through their family line. In just a short minute, we're going to introduce you to the 16th and 17th generation, people who have learned this trade, have mastered this trade, and we just have to go through all of this because it's wonderful. The tea set down there, and you know a lot more about the design than I do, but I know some of it is because of the ram's horn, and some is because it shows a thumbprint.
Right, and there's also a bit of an innovation going on. So, for example, this peacock, it didn't used to be a traditional symbol in history, but because it's so beautiful and so intricate, the makers of these lacquerware, they're actually introducing this kind of pictures into the lacquerware that they make today.
Just amazing. We're going to show you how this is done in just a minute, but once again, we want to bring you up to speed. We are here on our new China adventure, one of 3 buses crisscrossing the country. We are in the rich area of the Southwest, and when I say rich, I mean it has so much history, so much culture. It is an area that really been cut off for generations, but now that new roads have come through, there's everything opening up, and people can find out about our friend here, Xide County, and he has been doing this his whole life. He learned from his father, This is the gentleman who is now in his this is the 16th generation. Just amazing. And this intricate work on this table, for example, takes 2 months to make, 2 months, all by hand. And Taoyuan, if you can show the thumbprint, why that is important.
Right. So look at the symbol right here. It's actually it's supposed to be like a thumbprint, and that symbolizes the hardworking hands of the Yi people, just scraping a living off land in the past. So many of the symbols that we're seeing on these lacquerware actually come from traditional Yi culture. So I want to ask Mr. Xide a couple more questions about what some of these symbols actually mean. Xide老师，能不能再给我们介绍一下我们这种传统的漆器里面，就是最传统的这种图案，我们在这个桌子上都能看到哪些？
因为这个我们彝族漆器这个你是最长的，就是这3个东西就是最长的。这个是我们就是一般彝族生活一般是2菜1汤，这个是装汤的，这个是装饭的，这个是我们装那个彝族。那个头肉
只有2菜1汤。
哦，对对。
就是再大的家庭都只有2菜1汤吗？
一般的原来都是这样子，鲁地社会以前都是这样的。
Okay, so these 3 that we're seeing right now are the most traditional ones because in the past, when the Yi people have their meals, is usually with 2 dishes and 1 soup. So that one is used for the soup.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And how important is it as the southwest area of this nation opens up, more roads, more tourists come in here, is it to preserve this culture and work with the Chinese government and make sure this does not go away?
他问您，就是现在我们彝族也在经历着翻天覆地的改变，特别是咱们四川山区这边，路也通了，条件也好了，外面的游客也能进来了。这个对您就是对这种文化的一种推广和保护，能够发挥什么样的作用？
这是比较好。 因为是原来，比如说原来就是我们这个家族住的这个彝族漆器，就是我就是16代，我父亲那一代以前，就是一个是原来就是只穿儿不穿女的，只穿女不穿袜。
In the past, they only passed down the tradition to boys and not girls. So the sons of the houses, not the daughters.
以后呢，就是我们改革开放以后呢，就是我们就是什么都可以穿，因为我们现在要穿的就是不分这个家族，不分民族。而且是这全世界源于学都是我们的教导，因为这个我们就是彝族漆器修饰技艺，这个是我们国家的这个首批第一批的这个国家纪念项目。而一个呢是我是本身就是全国这个第一批的国家级传承人。
It's one of China's intangible cultural heritages, and they're now not only passing down the tradition to both boys and girls, they want to demonstrate it to the whole world. So
We're going to go over and see how this is done.
Mr. Ji, you actually taught your wife how to do this, right? 是您爱人阿姨这边是您教的吗？
对对。
Can we just yeah？ 我们走到那边去来看一看这个手艺是。
现在就是不分了，原来就是
只有男士。
媳妇会教，不教女儿的。现在
I'm going to pull this microphone out of the way, and Taoyuan, you can explain what's going on here, son, wife.
Okay, so this is your wife. 这个是您的爱人是吧？This is Mr. Ji Wuji's wife, and that is his son, which makes him the 17th generation lacquerware maker in the family. So just look at how intricate the strokes are, and it's done all by hand without any tools.
And Taoyuan, I've seen your handwriting on this bus trip, and compared to mine, it's good, but compared to anybody else's, we are awful. So you really have an appreciation for how fine this work is. Please have a seat, sir. And
大师您坐。
we can also tell people about those paints.
Tell us a little bit about this paint. 您给我们讲一下这个颜料。
原料就是这样的，就是我们这个彝族漆器，我们这个地方就是全部是天然气。比如说这个原来就是黑线，就是有一个漆树。
OK。
咱们有个漆树，你们听说过吗？
These are all natural materials.
有个漆树里面那个皮子给了扭出来，那些涮出来的。
For example, the black color comes from
只有3种颜色嘛。这黄色这个呢也是矿石。
Okay, so there are only 3 colors in the lacquerware:
wow. That's amazing.
yellow, red, and black. So tell us, what do the 3 colors actually symbolize? 那这3种颜色分别代表的是什么？
黑色代表这个土地嘛，黑色代表土地。红色就是我们彝族就是代表火。
The red symbolizes fire because the Yi people are a people who worship the fire.
因为为什么这个代表火呢？就是我们彝族全部多数在边远山区里面，就是冬天必须要烤火。
Because
老人去世必须要火化。
Because the Yi people live in remote mountains, and in the winter it gets really cold. That's why they worship the fire. And when they die, they would be cremated.
这个黄色就是代表美丽这个意思，所以就是我们就是现在。
And the yellow symbolizes beauty.
世界美丽人生，所以就只有3种颜色。
So the 3 colors together symbolizes a good life.
如果其他有个颜色就都是假的了，因为就是我们。 都是祖辈辈，就是这2种矿石这个原料，就是只有2种颜色。
He said, if there's any other color in this lacquerware, it's fake.
Okay, well, how hard is it to learn how to make these intricate strokes? I mean, this must have taken years to master.
他说，就学画这个到底有多难？是不是要练很多很多年才可以掌握这门手艺？
不一样，有人有些可能学得快，比如说我们这个制字这些学得快呢，就是一般都是3年以上就可以当图行动了。 有些7、8年、8、9年都学不会，不是学不好，学不好都一样的，对，就是小孩读书一样的，有些成绩好，有些成绩不好，这差不多。
He says it's like kids in school. You know, the smarter ones probably 3 years they're gonna master it. The dumber ones, 7, 8 years, and they're still not getting the gist of it.
What is his favorite design out of all of these?
他想问您最喜欢的这种图案是哪一个？
图案就是有。 都是有，都是喜欢的，但是就是这个方位不一样，有些但是现在这个产品没有，我一会儿上面给你解释嘛。因为这些，比如说这个是圆圈，这个是就是叫我们彝话就是叫 就是翻汉文就是牛木文，但是有些翻文翻成汉语，有些翻不准。
He says he likes them all, but this is one of the most traditional ones. So if we could just get a shot of this.
The circular pattern.
The circular, the spiral pattern actually symbolizes the horns of cows and sheep.
Wow, that's amazing. And we love the traditional outfits, the hat that the women wear, the hat that the men wear. Absolutely wonderful. Please thank our guest, and let's bring in...
谢谢您，吉武老师。
Let's bring in Victor Gao. He is our expert who's been with us on the bus for such a long time. Victor, what do you think of all this?
Well, I think this is truly a great heritage of the Yi people. The Yi people are distinguished in many senses. One is that they have a written language, written characters, and this has helped them to pass on their knowledge from generation to generation. And this lacquerware and this great gentleman, the great artist, are again another typical example of the great and proud heritage of the Yi people. And you talked about the patterns. Some of the patterns actually can trace back thousands of years. And this really makes the Yi people a very, very distinguished and unique and a proud member of the Chinese nationality, of 56 nationalities altogether.
Of course, and he was just telling me that some of the patterns he wouldn't even be able to explain to us in Mandarin because it's so deeply rooted in the Yi culture. But Mr. Gao, we said before the Yi people still live in remote mountains, and the Liangshan Prefecture is actually one of China's poorest regions. There's a whole poverty reduction campaign going on in China. How do you think is the most efficient way of lifting these people out of poverty?
Well, I think there are two things which I believe are very important. One is to absolutely do a good job in preserving the culture, preserving the heritage, etc. But on the other hand, I think the second thing, equally important, is to make the Yi culture better known, not only in China, but also throughout the world, so that more and more people will understand and appreciate the greatness and the uniqueness of the Yi culture, including the lacquerware, and then eventually they can really get greater recognition and acknowledgement worldwide for their distinguished culture.
A couple of things there. Firstly, this drinking cup here, I don't know how long it takes to make, if it would be for sale, but the work in here is museum quality, so it is not. This would be 800 yuan. Take a look at the beauty of this. And as you talked about wanting people to know about the Yi people, you told me earlier today that they have a tradition of not only being secluded, but keeping people out of coming into the community. How did that play in over the centuries?
Absolutely. The Yi nationality is one of the bigger ethnic minorities in China, and they have been fierce in defending their homeland and defending their culture. And one of the things they did is to keep outsiders out, and they did not allow them to come into their Yi villages unless with explicit approval from the village head. And this helped them to preserve their culture. And also, you talked about the remoteness or the isolated geography in which they live in. A part of the reason was that they retreated again and again into more and more remote areas. Part of the consideration was to defend their culture. And I think today, when we see this great gentleman and his family and all the other village folks together, I think we can appreciate why they are so fierce in defending their culture and why it is so important to make sure that the Yi culture, together with all the other nationalities, cultures, and heritage, are well preserved for themselves, for China as a whole, and for mankind in general.
Well, we're almost running out of time, but just very briefly, Mr. Gao, I think the fact that they have their own culture is beautiful, but the fact that some of them don't even speak Mandarin Chinese is also keeping them from integrating into modern China. What's your take on that?
Well, I hope eventually all the Yi people not only can speak their own language and write in their own characters, but also speak Mandarin, and hopefully they can also speak French or Russian or Japanese, because I always believe to learn another language is not depriving you of your own culture or heritage. It enhances your identity and it creates better ways of communicating with the rest of mankind.
Absolutely. I think that's already happening, as a matter of fact, because Mr. Xu has been to the United States 3 times to showcase his work.
Including my home city of Washington, D.C. Next time you come down, I'll give you a tour of some of the areas after being so gracious to us coming in. Well, it's been wonderful learning about the culture and seeing the wonderful talent of the artists in this area. And we're going to bring you more, obviously, throughout the day as we continue our new China venture. But right now, let's go back up to our good friends in the Northeast, Weao and Erica. Take it away.
Thank you, Sean and Tao Yuan, for showing us the artifacts and also the handicraft of the Yi ethnic minority. So whenever it comes to the southeastern part of the country, also we always have the different cultures, so colorful.
So true.
Yeah, right. Okay, so today our topic will be the understanding of cultural communication of different civilizations, and China and India, especially in the past, you know, the ancient empires, four of them, China and also India, they shared a lot in common, right, in the past, especially when it comes to religion, Buddhism, when it was first introduced to China in the 1st century. A long time ago, right? So to know more about that, the communication between China and India, now let's talk to our reporter Shweta Bajaj in India. So Shweta, take it over.
Within a space of a decade, the population of international students has risen remarkably to China from various countries. Now, with the top-ranking universities really being added, an impressive infrastructure in China, and also the scholarships opportunities have made sure that there are more and more international students looking towards a Chinese university. For instance, according to the QS World University Rankings of 2019, Chinese universities have ranked among the top 50 universities of the world. Tsinghua, for instance, has got the 17th place, the University of Hong Kong has got the 25th place, and then there's the Peking University, which is at the 30th place. So this also means that the popularity of the Chinese university for students who are excellent at what they do are looking at China. Scholarships to pursue higher education in China, specifically full-time scholarships that are offered by the Chinese government and also the Confucius Institute here in India, are also a big reason for this. Now, many of the students who go to China obviously learn Mandarin. That itself becomes a big push to push India and China cultural relations. The highest percentage of Indian students who go to China are pursuing medicine. Now, studying in China is more cost-effective for them, for Indian students compared to, for instance, the United States or the United Kingdom, and also the Chinese medical degrees are recognized by the Medical Council of India. So that makes its attractiveness way more. Now, students have a huge role to play, and this will permeate down to other levels of India as well when they talk about their experiences that they had in China. Now, word of mouth is the most effective way to promote anything, and students are the best way to carry that message. In the next few years, the number of students to China from India will only increase, which means hopefully relations will be even better. The future of the India-China relationship will depend on mutual sensitivity to each other's core concerns. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar had said this recently after the India-China high-level mechanism on culture and people-to-people exchange, an area where both the countries are giving a whole lot of attention. He also mentioned a need to exploit the positive outcomes of the Wuhan summit to take bilateral ties to a new level and build strong and public support in both the societies. Now, Wang Yi also mentioned about the importance of people-to-people contact between both the countries. Now, even as words are important, last few years has also seen highs in relationship and some backtracking when diplomatic hurdles between China and India have added to the mistrust between the people of the two countries. But even as I say this, the understanding of each other's people has definitely changed for the positive. For instance, in my 9 years with CGTN, I have seen people's perception here in India change dramatically about China. More well-known people in their expertise are working here in India with big Chinese companies now, and also interacting with their Chinese colleagues on a daily basis. Even among the general public, there is an increase in curiosity about China. The number of people, for instance, who are trying to learn Mandarin has gone up dramatically as more and more people here in India do business with the Chinese. The growth of the Confucius Institute here in India also shows that. Now, so telecom companies there are Chinese telecom companies which are now household names in India. In the last 5 years, this has happened. From Xiaomi to Huawei, Oppo, and others have been very, very successful in India. And then you have the startups. Chinese venture capitalist funds are another example of this. They have grown rapidly. In 2018 alone, Indian startups raised around $5.6 billion from various Chinese investors. In 2017, that number was at about $3 billion. And look at the number of companies. For instance, Alibaba has investment of about $500 million in India. Snapdeal also in $700 million in an Indian company called the Paytm, and $150 million in Zomato, which was all done in 2015, and many other countless investments have also been done. And then there is the film industry. The number of Indian films that have done well in China has surged. So much so that many Indian filmmakers are now making and thinking of looking at stories with keeping China and India in mind. For example, there is a movie coming out very recently here in India. It's called Made in China, and I'm sure in the future that movie will definitely look for a China release.
Thank you so much, Shweta Bajaj, joining us there from India. And it's become very clear, of course, that the relationship between China and India dates back centuries. And it really ties in with what we're talking about today. And that is, of course, dialogue and mutual learning between civilizations. Earlier, we were talking about the Maritime Silk Road. And, of course, it's starting to become clear that the Maritime Silk Road was about far more than just commodities.
Yeah.
The influence has spread across religion, culture, architecture. It's quite amazing. So at this point, let's bring in our resident analysts. Of course, we are with Professor Zhang Gong and Professor Lin Boqiang. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Let's pick up where we left off. As I was saying, you know, it's not just about commodities when we look at the Maritime Silk Road, but indeed about culture. You know, Buddhism as a religion is so closely associated with China, but has its roots in India. Tell us about that.
Yes. Buddhism was originally in India but came about and thrived in China. I think it came to China mostly through the land routes, not so much through the Maritime Silk Road. But I think Hinduism also came to China very much because of the Maritime Silk Trade. And in addition to Hinduism, Muslim, for example, also came to China. The city we're going to visit in Quanzhou, there are temples and shrines and also churches, Christian churches as well. All can be found in today's Quanzhou. So at one point, it shows that the city was really a cross-section of various cultural and religious elements around the world. So I think you know, this is a really glorious time in Chinese history, that foreign influences and cultures and religions could be really, really tolerated, and actually they thrived here, right here, the city that we're going to visit in a few more minutes.
That's fascinating. In your view, Mr. Lin, Professor?
Yes, I think that you're right. The Maritime Silk Road, and not only just a trade, as a religion, as a culture. But I think that the trade is where it started. Because you go somewhere, you got to have some purpose, right? And trade is a very good purpose to connect the people together. And the Buddhism coming to China, I think it's longer, much earlier than the coming to Quanzhou.
Yeah, the first century.
It's the first century.
It's on the route,
right,
land
right,
route,
right.
not so much on
So Quanzhou is more started from trade, and then coming different religions, people coming to mix together.
Yeah.
It's not really because of religion, and then the people begin to ask for something to come in. It's not. It's because of trade. You get people all together, and then they become different culture, different religions. So it's basically a pop culture, in my view.
Yeah. So Professor Lin,
yes,
since you're local here,
yes.
And I heard that in Quanzhou, this is a place that is a hotspot of different religions still now.
Yeah.
If you go to the temple, you have Taoism, you have Buddhism, and also so on the roofs, and then you have the little figurines or the figures with different characteristics, like the Christianity. You're going to see Christianity, Catholicism,
right,
and also the goddess, the traditional Chinese folklore. So is that true?
That's true.
Yes.
And also it's it's a bit funny that people don't go to wrong temples, okay, except tourists. So they always find a way to their own religions. Other than tourists. Tourists, of course, go to all countries. Yeah. So, but what I have to say is that the Buddhism is still the main one.
Yeah.
In church.
Yeah, it really seems.
Other is just a minority.
Yes.
Because the Han is about 90-some percentage of population. Minority is 2 to 3% right now. There's still minority people in church.
That's
But percentage is
fascinating.
very small. Yeah.
Do you think that was a particularly unique time in history in terms of religious tolerance, acceptance, and people kind of being able to share and learn from each other when it comes specifically to religion?
I think the Song Dynasty time was a great time for exchanges of religions and foreign cultures. In the city of Quanzhou, look at its history. Before, I would say, 1300 AD, it was very much tolerated. There's actually quite large population of foreign people living in the city, and obviously, with these people, they came along with their own religion. They established temples and mosques and churches during that time. But there was actually one time a sort of a revolt started between Muslims, between Shiite Muslims and Sunni Muslims, and this little opposition grew into a sort of opposition against foreigners. So that was, and after that, there was a reduction of population of foreign people in the city. So I think, but before that, it was definitely tolerated. But I think if you look at the overall history, foreign religions and foreign cultures are very much tolerated here in China. China is a melting pot for a lot of foreign influences, historically and as well as now. So I think the foreign religions are definitely tolerated. Buddhism is a prime example. It thrived in China. It developed much more than its original place in India. So this is a very good example.
Yeah, the local religion is Taoism. So we had Buddhism in the 1st century introduced to China, and also Zoroastrianism, right? Very old, and that was in Iran.
Right.
And different religions like Christianity, Catholicism, all introduced to China, right? So when it comes to culture, religion is part of culture, of course, right? So it was a melting pot in Quanzhou when it comes to different cultures, probably food and anything. So we have it in a sign now when it comes to some other cultures, like people, like the names of someone, like the surnames, according to surnames, where that person was from in the first place, right? So what is unique?
When we talk about the multicultural, multi-religion in Quanzhou, I think that's a part of the reason that the United Nations recognize the Quanzhou as a maritime shared road. It's only one. Many cities claim that they are the starting point, but Quanzhou was the only one recognized by United Nations. It is I think that's good reasons. It's because of the trade. They brought people together. And you are doing the trade there, you need to go to temple, right? To different religions, right? They begin to build different art. So I think that the trade is more important for Quanzhou rather than different cultures. In other words, you have the trade first, and then different cultures get together. Right.
I mean, also that Quanzhou, serves a very important, as you said, Quanzhou is one of the trading centers in Asia in relation to at the time, the two most dominant maritime powers in the world. That's Spain and Portugal. Spain established Manila as its center of trade in the Far East. Portugal did the same thing with respect to Macau. So the trade between Quanzhou and Macau and trade between Quanzhou and Manila was thriving at the time. And I think I would recall this as the beginning of the global trade, because Spanish are indeed engaged in sort of a global trade pattern, what's called the Spanish Guardian trade, crossing the Pacific as well as the Atlantic Ocean. So it was the beginning of the global trading network, and Quanzhou represents a very important piece in that big puzzle, and represents China at the time.
And the other thing, apart from religion and culture, that also was sort of, being traded needed between civilizations, as it were, was information and skills. Just talk us through some of the things that came to China or that China took to the world that are still being seen today as a result of that maritime Silk Road. So, I mean, just the working with silk, for instance, or paper making, ceramics, those types of things.
I can think of some of the ship technologies that are later on being used by the Spaniards, by the Portuguese, by the Brits. Some of them actually came from China. The rudder, for example, the ship's rudder technology was invented in China, and it was widely adopted later on. And I can think of the silk making technology was definitely later on promulgated throughout the world. Silk was most, in my opinion, is the most important product at the time from China's perspective.
How about now in Quanzhou, Professor Lin? Like we used to have silk in the past, right? In Quanzhou and ceramics. Not anymore.
Right now is more industrial, small electronic, shoemaking, textile, and silk is not an important item.
So it's only about ceramics and the fabric and also shoemaking. I know Anta, one of the largest shoemakers in China, is in Quanzhou. It's located in Quanzhou, right?
Right.
Okay. So what is the reason behind that?
I think the reason behind that, it all started at the reform of opening up China. At the time that China really need two things: one's capital, the other one's technology.
Yeah.
And Quanzhou has a very good advantage because of overseas Chinese. You got so many overseas Chinese from Philippines, from Taiwan, and then they all come to Quanzhou because that's really their home. So they just go back to their hometown to build small factories and to build that. So traditionally, Quanzhou people in Quanzhou are more open to outside because there are so many overseas Chinese coming back and forth. So as I said, technology and capital put together, that Quanzhou become what it is today. And all the small industries actually start in Quanzhou. Some start in Xiamen, but very small. They all start in Quanzhou and then become bigger. And quite a few name brand, like Qipilang, they all start in Quanzhou.
Oh.
They are headquartered in Xiamen, but its origin is
there are many brands over there, right?
Just
It has an amazing history, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So in Quanzhou, we have ceramics and clothing as except wolves, like clothing, and also Anta, sneakers, clothing, right? And you also have this, not just for bathroom, the utilities. Okay, also in Quanzhou. So back then, we see Quanzhou, it has a connection with the outside world because of the people from there. They usually move outside. So we did have this, what do we call it, Chinese people's diaspora during that time.
Diaspora.
So can you tell us something about that part of the history?
The Hokkien people has a huge overseas diaspora. I mean, they're I think it's very much sea-oriented kind of a culture. People are adventurous. They got into the sea, and eventually they reach many places in Southeast Asia, in Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Java at the time. So gradually they started to move out and establish local communities. And did the same thing with respect to Taiwan as well. So over time, the industrialist people, they worked very hard, and eventually they became involved in trade with China, and that's how they established their local bases in many of these countries.
Yeah.
Well, we will have to leave it there with our group for now. Let's go check in with our colleagues in the northeast. Erica and Huiyao, tell us what's happening with you.
Hello, Lindy and Zhenghua. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Welcome back. New China, what are we, day 6?
Day 6. We're halfway. We are almost halfway through our journey.
We are. And let's see. I am Erica Pizzi alongside my amazing co-host, Wei Huiyao.
Yes.
And we are in Jilin Province, the capital city, Chongqing.
Changchun is the provincial capital city of Jilin Province.
And we are actually traveling through what this area is known for, which is the Hongqi automobile.
You pronounce it right.
Did I do a good
Hongqi
job?
Industrial Zone.
Yes, which means red flag. So this is like luxury car brand. This is the factory that we're going to learn so much more later throughout the day. But today we're talking cultural diversity, which here in Dongbei, which is Chinese for the Northeast, that is such a big deal here. We're talking about a lot of different ethnic minorities, different cultures, and of course, the proximity to Russia, Korea,
Mongolia, and
I
all
mean,
that.
you're getting all sorts of influence. Man, we were just coming from Harbin. How amazing was the food in Harbin?
I mean, all the Russian architecture and meatballs, patties. And all I remember is the patties and the cabbages.
Whatever the cabbage, you haven't stopped talking about the cabbage.
I've had like 8 that night. Oh, so good.
Let's bring in our guests, though, because they can really weigh in on so much more about the cultural diversity of the Northeast that it's known for. And we've got a new guest. Thank you so much. We have Benjamin Qiu.
Yes.
I got that right? Okay, perfect. And you are with Shanghai
University of Finance, Economics, and
There
Paris
he is.
Group. Yes.
We're going to get better at introducing you, I promise. And our esteemed guest, Professor Li Yang, Senior Fellow for China Association of Trade. All right, so Li Yang, talk to us first about the characteristics that truly make up Northeast when it comes to cultural diversity.
Yes, first of all, I think the choice of the topic, cultural diversity, is a very delicate one and considerate, especially for viewers. And coming back to your question, what are the characteristics?
Right.
And it's just really difficult to generalize, but I made an effort, okay?
Thank you.
Three, okay? One is the ethnic minority culture. You know, in the 3 provinces, Heilongjiang, there are 51 ethnic minority groups.
Wow.
In Liaoning and Jilin, there are 44 ethnic groups in each. So we put them together as a kind of a ethnic minority culture, because those are the unique culture that they bring to people living around them.
Absolutely.
The second is what we call the Central Plain culture or Central China culture. This is the main body of Chinese culture. In almost every place, there is a kind of a Central Plain culture.
The majority.
The majority. And then, foreign culture, which is very typical of, the 3 provinces, and in Heilongjiang, dominantly Russian, Jewish, cultures.
And the
so you
Korean
see the
cultures,
difference.
too.
Pardon me?
The Korean cultures. Like
The Korean cultures,
Yeah, we're getting
typically
closer and
in
closer
this
to Korea, yeah.
in this province.
Right, exactly.
Right. They have several, Korean autonomous prefecture, counties, and so on.
You can get the best Korean food, I promise, and the Japanese food in Dali and everything. Just like all these exotic, like neighboring countries, authentic like cuisines.
Yes.
And we've talked about the fusion too. I mean, if you can get authentic Russian, but then you can also get the fusion with Chinese, which I think is really cool too.
Yes, but we've been talking a lot about food.
Yes. The interaction is always.
It's not like we are having this
We're always
food
hungry.
tour. We're always hungry. But remember, this is also a place that with a very rich history in film and automobile, and it's just like it's so diverse that in terms of what it brings to the audience and to people living here and to the outside world, just got so much to do here.
But the Northeast has a little bit more of a special twist to this, how all these cultures have come together here. And Benjamin, you wanted to touch on that because there's a modern element to this when you talk about like social media and stuff. So tell us more about that.
Well, imagine 200 years ago, here, a lot of nomadic people. Imagine people surrounding, if some fire started to sing and eat lamb and dance.
Yes.
It's built into their blood. There's a very traditional performance format called the 二人转.
Yes.
It's about duet. It's about storytelling, about dancing. That everybody knows in China knows about this very famous format, and especially in the new media, is exactly what is very conducive to spreading on the internet. Because on the internet, through broadcasting, live streaming, you just need one person to do it, right? And they have been doing for hundreds of years.
And it's very addicting to watch because you can literally just watch it for like an hour, 2 hours.
Exactly. They are so good at it. They are very humorous. They are very good at it. So they actually is the majority of the performers on the internet right now. Using
that is a big transition from my childhood experience when I every spring festival gala we tune in to the television, we watch it together with our big families, and you see those Northeast comedians like Zhao Benshan, Xiao Shenyang. They're so good at what they do. Because we talk about this Dongbeihua, right? You asked me what is Dongbei. Dongbei is Northeastern Chinese,
right?
But this Dongbeihua is like the language, the dialect of Northeast, which is really
so it's like
different.
A little bit different from
It has
standard
a
Mandarin.
very different flavor. I would put it that way. It sounds very humorous the instant you hear it. You know this is someone coming from Northeast, and he speaks in a very different way than people from other places.
Yeah, I think the humor actually is because of their optimistic attitude towards the external world. And where the humor is coming from? They spend the winter. During the winter time, they don't really have anything to do.
Right.
So people.
Lest we forget how cold it gets here.
Yes. So people will get together in one family, in one place. They just talk about it.
Coming up with all those great ideas for skits and shows.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah, if you're stuck inside, you might as well.
Right, and this is basically how this kind of a show is coming from, and this is how they develop the humor in what they do. Okay, and then it's become a typical style of the Dongbei performance, and also Dongbei people's character. Wherever they go, when they talk to you, they are just like Americans. They're very humorous.
So with the explosion more recently for people being able to find ways to make money, like not on YouTube. What's the Chinese
TikTok,
YouTube is
Douyin.
Okay,
Douyin.
so but to use sort of, I've seen some people like creating like shows online that people are watching.
Right.
So you're saying that that's something that you see more of coming out of the Northeast?
Yes, actually, there are deeper economic reasons to that. In terms of percentage of privately owned companies, the percentage is much more higher in the south than in the north. A lot of these performers, I guess, during the daytime, they are probably, a cashier or stay on the price employees. They have very fixed time for their work, and after work, they're moonlighting on this platform and using their very traditional humorous style. So everybody likes it.
And make money too.
And make money, yeah.
That's what makes money.
Yeah.
And now this is the social media, the new media platform, and it draws viewers, millions of viewers, tune in to their performance. People watch, others eating food for like half an hour or so. Do you know that? That's called Shibo in China.
People watch people doing anything. I mean, whether they're like learning how to put makeup on, or I mean.
I don't know the word with Wang Hong, how this is going to be translated into English.
Like celebrities online.
Online celebrity. I visited, what is the name of Yiwu?
Yiwu, okay.
Yiwu is is a center of small commodities. The distribution is around the world, but of course, they cover China. And do you know what is their future? They want to develop the city into a social media celebrity economy.
Oh wow!
They attracted a lot of people. Like people from Northeast humor, and then they started to sell things while using, the humorous languages.
Yeah.
The style.
How sustainable is that though?
It's very interesting because this actually reduced the intermediary processes of distribution.
Right.
So when you do the direct broadcasting, your potential customer or wholesaler is all watching what you are doing. If they're interested, they say, "Oh, I want a case of that," and then you tell me how I should sell it. What should I say to impress my potential customers? It is a very interesting process. You see the transformation, modern technology, information technology is transformed.
So bring it back to cultural diversity, and I think you touched on this, Liang, earlier, which is what is special about the Northeast. People bringing whether it's their little
humor,
twist on the language or the humor or whatever, whether they're actors or comedians, it comes from being exposed and maybe potentially impacted from these other cultures that are here.
They're like sponge and absorbing different cultural influences and putting all in their creation of.
And there's also changes, over time.
And that's what I want to talk about. So we're looking at, we're celebrating the 70 years of the founding of PRC, New China. how well protected, I mean, this is getting a little more serious here, but how well protected are the ethnic minorities in this area? I know we've talked about this a little bit, Li Yang, but is there more that the government can do to ensure that they keep their heritage and their own cultures, and it doesn't get diluted?
Yes, there are a lot of what is so-called non-material heritages, that China has applied, for different kind of international organizations
Cultural heritage.
to endorse culture. Many of them, a good percentage of them, are kind of ethnic minority cultural heritages. So this is really consists, the part of the total Chinese culture. Without those minority ethnic cultures, I think there will be no serious Chinese culture as a whole. So we see those cultures as part of the Chinese culture.
Right. In fact, if you turn on the music channel, the Chinese government always give the opportunity for the minority to perform the arts they are most proud of. In fact, some of these policies, even we very favorable policies to some of these minorities, including during the one-child policy era.
Oh yeah.
In fact, they are allowed to have more than one kid.
Yeah.
And
we don't want that.
too.
Exactly.
Tiger mentioned about this the other day, right?
You do get additional points in the national college entrance exam, and so that they can have better opportunities to
get into better colleges.
I mean, in the end, it's about celebrating the diversity, right?
Yes.
That's what
we don't want to keep
makes it better.
the ethnic minorities cultures in a museum. That's the last thing we want to do. We want to
celebrate,
continue on, pass down this, all these heritage, the diverse culture of China.
Yeah, there's also a natural interaction, that impact, the cultures, that they are, being together. For example, the central China culture. Mm-hmm. My grandma generation used to have, bounded feet. Okay, whereas the ethnic minority culture, they don't really do that.
Liberated.
Right.
Unbounded, so we call it liberated.
Right.
But over time, the younger generation, my mother generation, and ladies today, they don't really do it anymore. Mm-hmm. So they actually received, some kind of influence.
Exactly
from that.
It's like influencing each other with,
So this is the natural interaction, natural, assimilation, whatever.
Absolutely. And you were mentioning that even when it comes to language. We've talked about it with food, we've talked about it with some cultural traditions, but now we're even talking about language as well. If you've got folks in Harbin actually using a version of the Russian word for bread, well, then there you go.
Хлеб, lieba, брать, which is dress. We say bulaji.
Yes.
I
just.
You weren't a fan.
I wasn't a fan.
I'm outing you. You weren't a fan.
Yeah. So
cannot get over how hard it is.
You can see, the different cultures that interact with each other.
That's the beauty.
It is the beauty.
And it's right. That's the beautiful part of it. And sometimes we take pride by saying lieba, which is something that you don't understand. And I feel proud to explain to you.
Perfect.
This is coming from Russian language, Polaji. I'm saying, that is.
And there should be a pride. There should be a pride in celebrating diversity.
The moment we got into our hotel, the modern hotel, which was the oldest in Harbin, we saw the Russian lady playing piano there.
Oh yeah. Right. So not just cultural, people to people exchange. That will bring life.
Yes.
That
to
all
cultural
adds to the
diversity,
cultural
which is a robust, which is a live thing.
And that's something that the government talks about now. Xi Jinping talks about wanting more and more of that with other countries in the world, but it's been happening within China.
Exactly.
And Dongbei, here in the Northeast,
sort of like
is a perfect example of that.
Yes, and it's not an example, it's also like a gateway.
Yeah.
Right? For people to go into Russia and see different influences. It's like this border thing, it has the Chinese part of it, and then has the Russian influence.
That goes beyond border.
Right.
And bring people of different cultures together.
Exactly.
Make the world
a better place. Oh, Leon! You're going to make me cry. All right. Thank you both so much. Plenty more throughout the day that we'll have with our amazing guests. But for now, let's send it back to Li Jianhua and Lindy.
to its new manufacturing powerhouse in the southeast and to its emerging southwest. CGTN offers you a panoramic view of contemporary China. Our crews will travel along 3 different routes and come to you live from dozens of locations and 3 mobile studios. Join us for an all-inclusive look at China on our TV channel and digital platforms, September the 9th to the 20th. It is New China, then and now, in celebration of the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, only on CGTN.
Thank you, Erica and Huiyao. Thank you so much for bringing what you have over there in northeast China. And also, Huiyao, I like your metaphor that Dongbei people are very much like a sponge, because we're taking different elements, different cultures, and we internalize everything that we get from the outside world. It's because Dongbei people actually, especially from northeast parts of China, we are moving around a lot, and then you can find people from northeast China almost everywhere. So of course today we have a special segment, and our colleague Li Zhao is going to join us, and she's going to give us some comments.
Yeah, I'm Li Zhao with CGTN Digital, and my job this time is basically reading off all the comments from all of our social media platforms, and of course that includes our Facebook, Twitter, Chinese Weibo, and of course our official app. Let's see what we have. So we have pretty many comments today. A lot of people saying the great sceneries here in China. There's good morning, a lot of good mornings. There's Zarman saying China's development are amazing. There are people saying pretty dishes. I believe that was talking about our colleagues back in Southwest, right? They're doing some lacquerwares.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. Why don't you guys keep going, and I'll see what other comments we have.
Great. Okay. We look forward to hearing your comments, so do send those through. But for now, let's continue with our discussion. Of course, we've been talking about dialogue and mutual learning among civilizations. I want to bring our guests back into the discussion. Of course, Professor Zhong Gong and Professor Li Boqiang. Now, my question to the both of you essentially is, if we're talking about mutual learning between civilizations, can today's Belt and Road Initiative achieve what the Maritime Silk Road did in terms of the sharing of cultures and civilizations when you consider today's geopolitical environment?
That's exactly one of the objectives of the Belt and Road Initiative, is to, in addition to just helping developing countries to establish trading facilities for things like port facilities, electricity, things like that, it's basic infrastructures. People-to-people exchange, the dialogue among nations is one of the primary objectives of the Belt and Road Initiative. I think in today's world, against the backdrop of ever escalating, protectionism, localism, unilateralism. Exactly. I think it's all more important to emphasize the importance of dialogues and cultural exchanges.
But how is China going to get the buy-in from countries that seem to be moving in the complete opposite direction? As you say, unilateralism or protectionism is an agenda that other countries are very doggedly pursuing, it seems.
Well, I think we have to do our own things. We have to build consensus among the people who are willing to do this. So it's called a coalition of the willing, right? In terms of sort of a political arena, we're not interested in assembling a force to invade some country. Speaking of the coalition of the willing, so I think we need to spread our message, trying to talk to people and exchange our views and build consensus among people who are willing to with the same opinion on this. In terms of how to battle against unilateralism and protection, I think there are multinational organizations that where we can work together with European countries and other major powers to sort of do our own persuasion.
What's your view, Professor Lin? Some people think that the Belt and Road Initiative is just way too ambitious for this day and age.
Well, I think that at this moment it starts with infrastructure development, because China has a huge capacity. And the Belt and Road countries, they don't have the infrastructure. For example, like Pakistan, they don't have sufficient electricity like India. And China has a very good capacity in building infrastructures. It's the largest manufacturing base. But I think the end point should be the trade and culture, dialogue, cooperation. That will be the end point. It probably started with infrastructure at this moment. It looks like all the projects are really infrastructure related, but it's not really the purpose. The purpose is that use the infrastructure development, bring the trade together, bring the culture together. Use Quanzhou as an example. Quanzhou, remember, that is one of the largest port in the east in ancient times. And that's why you have so many cultures get together in Quanzhou. We are going to visit, you see the different culture, different background, and different temples, that kind of stuff. And so the trade should be the end of the objective of
and I like that you say that. And I just quickly want to add, just from an African perspective, there's sometimes this perception that the Belt and Road Initiative is China's new way to take over Africa, as it were, you know? This is neo-colonization. So just help us correct that, because as you say, the end goal is trade at the end of the day, right?
I think that it's particularly dangerous to think of that way.
Yes.
For example, I often say that the nationalism protects the trade protection. It's really going to stop us from doing many important things. For example, China has the largest wind and solar capacity, and we are cheapest in the world. But by protectionism, you actually stop the trade fraud for cheaper manufactured goods. For example, wind and solar equipment going to different countries, and even go to Europe, United States. And this not only the technology problem, because it reduces the technology speed over, and also cost speed over. In other words, they can use actually cheaper equipment to do something for human good, so it reduces CO2 emissions. But right now, they have to pay more for that, and therefore the demand in that country will be reduced, etc. So I think that for the future and for our human development, we need to have an open to.
Addressing your question about what is the difference from old colonialism, right? I think the most important thing is that I think Chinese companies going to Africa not backed by gunpowder, not backed by engaging in slave trade, for example. I think this is very much premised upon mutual agreements. It's indeed for seeking mutual interests. On one side, China certainly benefits from trade and investment in Africa, and Africa also benefits from trade and investment from Chinese investment as well. I think certainly there are rooms for improvement. I think Chinese companies going to Africa needs to be reminiscent of the need for creating local jobs, for example, the need for taking care of the local environment, for example, the need for getting rid of any kind of corruption, for example. And all these things are very legitimate concerns. But that doesn't undermine the most fundamental theme of Belt and Road Initiative, is that to seek mutual benefits, to seek mutual interests. I think that's the major difference from the so-called old colonialism kind of acquisition.
So the Belt and Road Initiative, it has a lot of criticism actually, especially in the West, right? So we're talking about cooperation, we're talking about trade, and those are all the positives. But many are saying that the Belt and Road Initiative, through the Belt and Road Initiative, China is trying to take over from the United States as the superpower. So what's your take on that?
Well, that's what Michael Pence said. He had delivered a speech at APEC and said it's China's Belt and Road Initiative. It's a constricted belt. It's a one-way road. Well, it's not a one-way road. It's a two-way road. As I said, it's for mutual benefits, for both parties benefit from this. China is not forcing any country. We're not, throwing Belt and Road Initiative down the throat of any country. It's all based on mutual benefits and mutual interests. It's agreed upon. We have contracts. We have local, mutual agreements. So certainly, this is not going to be a one-way road. And also, when he says the Belt and Road Initiative is a constricted belt, what he means is that it's mostly just for Chinese companies. No, it's not the case anymore. We have a third-party cooperation agreement. We would like to have other countries to participate as well. China signed sign agreement with Japan, for example, to ask Japanese companies to participate in projects funded by China or financed by China. China's two banks, one being China Development Bank and China Export-Import Bank. So certainly this is not exclusively a Chinese project. It's a project for multiple parties to participate. So I think the acquisition from the United States, particularly from Vice President Michael Pence, doesn't hold water at all.
Okay.
Some of the great insights from our Professor Gong and also Professor Lin talking about the historical maritime Silk Roads as well as the prospects of the Belt and Road Initiative. Thank you so much. Of course, we encourage you to follow us on all of our social media platforms. That includes our Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and of course our official app. Make sure to download it in your app store. Thank you so much again for watching, and until next time, that's 2 o'clock this afternoon. See you then.
Bye.
In 70 years, China has undergone unprecedented transformation. From its old industrial base in the northeast to its new manufacturing powerhouse in the southeast and to its emerging southwest, CGTN offers you a panoramic view of contemporary China. Our crews will travel along 3 different routes and come to you live from dozens of locations and free mobile studios. Join us for an all-inclusive look at China on our TV channel and digital platforms, September the 9th to the 20th. It is New China, then and now, in celebration of the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, only on CGTN.